The same pot, the same vendor, the same bowl. 6 a.m., thin, almost watery. You drink it and think, fine. 9 a.m., rich, deep, viscous. You drink it and think, that's the best pho I've ever had. Nothing changed. Same stall, same broth, same price. So why does the exact same bowl taste completely different depending on when you show up? The answer isn't freshness. It's not the ingredients. And it has nothing to do with luck. It's a system. One that every serious vendor in Vietnam manages every single morning, and almost no customer ever sees it. Here's the assumption most people bring to Vietnam, especially if they've read any travel content about the food. Go early. Street food is freshest in the morning. Vendors prep overnight, open at dawn, sell out by 9. If you want the best, you show up first. It's a reasonable assumption. It's how most food works. A bakery's best bread comes out of the oven at 6 a.m. A fish market's best catch goes first. But street food, specifically the broth-based dishes that define Vietnamese street eating, doesn't follow that logic. And the reason tells you something about how these stalls actually operate that most customers never see. Picture a pho, vendor setting up at 4:30 in the morning. The broth has been simmering since the night before. Bones, charred ginger, star anise, a few other things depending on who you ask. By the time the first customer sits down at 6 a.m., that broth is hot, fragrant, and ready to serve. But here's what it isn't: concentrated. At 6 a.m., the broth is at its most diluted. The collagen from the bones hasn't fully broken down yet. The fat hasn't had time to integrate. The flavor is there, but it's thin. Living here full-time, I've sat at the same stall at 6 a.m. and again at 9 a.m. The vendor is the same. The bowl looks the same. It doesn't taste the same. By 9 a.m., something has changed. The water has been evaporating for 3 hours. The broth has tightened. The mouthfeel is different, richer, more viscous. The seasoning the vendor added at 7 a.m. has had time to fully dissolve and distribute. That's when the broth is at its peak. Not at opening, not at sellout, somewhere in between. And the window is shorter than you think. It's not just the broth. Every element of a street food stall follows its own arc across the morning. Proteins. The first cuts served are technically the freshest, but fresh doesn't always mean best. Beef that's been sliced and sitting for an hour is slightly more relaxed in texture. The beef bones continuing to release collagen since 7 a.m. tastes different at 9 a.m. In many cases, better. Garnishes and herbs. These genuinely do peak early. The bean sprouts are crispest at 6 a.m. The herbs are brightest. By 10 a.m., they've been sitting in ambient heat. This is the one area where earlier actually is better. But it's also the component that matters least to overall flavor. Seasoning recalibration. Vendors taste their broth constantly. They're adjusting fish sauce, salt, MSG, not to a fixed formula, but to a moving target. As the broth concentrates, the flavor intensifies, and they pull back. A vendor who's been running their stall for 10 years is making dozens of micro adjustments before noon that no customer ever notices. The result? The bowl you get at 6 a.m. and the bowl you get at 9 a.m. are literally different products. Same stall, same price, different bowl. Here's the mechanism behind all of this. Vietnamese street food stalls, especially broth-based ones, don't operate like restaurants that maintain consistent output across a full service day. They operate like a single batch production system. One prep cycle, one broth, one arc from start to sellout. Because the broth is a living system, not a static liquid. Every hour changes it. Water evaporates, which concentrates flavor. Collagen breaks down, which adds body. Fat renders and redistributes. Seasoning absorbs and rounds out. The vendor's job isn't to make the same bowl every time. It's to manage that arc, tasting, adjusting, compensating, so that the bowl at every point in the window is at least acceptable, and the bowl at peak is exceptional. What that peak looks like depends on the dish. For pho, it's usually 8:30 to 10 a.m. After the broth has tightened, but before the vendor starts thinning it with water to stretch the batch.
For a bún bò,
The spice compounds take longer to fully integrate, so peak often runs later. For banh mi, the bread dynamic flips everything. The best banh mi comes within an hour of the bread delivery, which usually hits between 6 and 8 a.m. There is no universal best time. There's only the best time for that stall, for that dish. And figuring it out is the difference between a good meal and a forgettable one. This system isn't perfect, and it's worth being honest about where it breaks down. The single batch model means quality isn't consistent. It's variable by design. A vendor optimizing for peak flavor at 9 a.m. is, almost by definition, serving a lesser product at 6 a.m. and again at 11 a.m. For regulars who know the timing, this is fine. For someone who shows up once based on a recommendation, it's a coin flip. There's also a late day problem. Some vendors push past their natural sellout window. They add water to thin the broth, stretch the protein portions, run on residual heat. The broth that was excellent at 9 a.m. is hollow by 1 p.m. Same stall. Different product. No way to know unless you've been there before. And then there's the practical trap. The best window, that 8:30 to 10 a.m. range for most stalls, overlaps with the longest lines. The crowd isn't random. Regular customers who know what they're doing are showing up at exactly that time. If you're arriving at 6:30 a.m. to beat the crowd, you're not getting a better bowl. You're getting a quieter table and a thinner broth. The system rewards knowledge. It doesn't advertise itself. Growing up Vietnamese American, I thought I understood Vietnamese food. I knew the dishes, the flavors, the way my family talked about pho like it was sacred. What I didn't understand was the system underneath it. The timing, the arc, the fact that the bowl we grew up on back in Southern California was probably never even the peak bowl. It was a version Vietnamese mothers remembered from 50 years ago. Frozen in time, served 10,000 miles from where it came from. Living here full time, that's one of the first things you feel. The food you grew up with and the food that actually exists here, they're not the same thing. That's what this channel is really about. Not the food itself, the system underneath it that nobody explains. So here's the actual answer to why the same street food stall in Vietnam can taste completely different depending on when you show up. It's not the recipe. It's not luck. It's not freshness in the way most people think. It's timing. Every broth-based street food stall runs a single arc per day, from diluted to peak to decline. The vendors who've been doing this for decades have optimized around that arc. Most customers never learn to read it. Fresh doesn't mean best. Early doesn't mean better. The best bowl isn't waiting at opening. It's waiting for the broth to become what it was always going to be. If you've eaten street food in Vietnam, do you think you've been hitting the peak window? Or have you mostly been arriving at the wrong time? The timing system behind these stalls doesn't exist in isolation. It connects to something else. Why the best vendors in Vietnam deliberately sell out before they have to. Not because they run out, because selling out is the strategy. That's next.